Hey, church family. I wanted to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement as we continue to pray for the recovery of our country. Now, I must confess that I'm always amazed by the people who insist that, science must be the basis for every decision we make. And when it comes to the coronavirus, we have to use the science before, we move forward and these sorts of things. But then they go on to make many decisions, not because of science, but because of the fear of the unknown. For example, there are people who insist that, well, science proves that masks work and that masks are able to stop the spread of the virus. And so, there's mandates for us to wear masks as we go into public, and I can't go into the grocery store unless I have my mask on. But then these same people who insist that masks work, they turn around and insist that there's no safe way to open polling centers where people can go and vote in person. And so they're trying to, make it so that, we all do mail-in voting. So let me get this straight. It's safe for masked people to go stand in line at a grocery store. But at the same time, there's science that shows that there's no safe way to stand in another line at a polling location. I can stand in line at the grocery store, but I can't stand in line at a polling location. Something magically happens at a polling location where somehow the coronavirus can get through the mask and infect everybody else. What's the scientific study that supports this belief? Or how about the decision to stop schools from reopening? Is this something that is based in science? Well, listen, according to the CDC, infants, kids, and teenagers together have accounted for roughly 5% of all confirmed coronavirus cases. The science also shows us that this same age group makes up 0.06% of all reported deaths. Simply put, the science shows us that 99.9% of the kids who are infected will easily recover from this virus. So there's no scientific reason for us to believe that the reopening of the schools is going to result in an increase of death for our kids. At the same time, the research also reveals that kids aren't super spreaders of the virus. And so there's no scientific reason for us to believe that the reopening of our schools will result in kids spreading the coronavirus to their teachers. Therefore, the decision to keep classrooms closed is not based on science. It's based on fear. There's also good science that helps us to see that the outbreak that occurred here in the Sun Belt states back in July is almost over. The scientific proof of this, well, it's seen in the research of a mid-19th century epidemiologist. His name is William Farr. According to Farr, all viruses follow a similar pattern, which can be quantified by the slope of the death curve. Once the peak of the death curve is reached, we can correctly assume that the infection has already started falling in the same progressive steps. The evidence of this can be seen in the curve that occurred there in the northeastern states, specifically New York. COVID-19 infections dropped off there in New York back in mid-June, and they've been at a very, very low level ever since then, just as far as model predicted. The graph of the decreasing death rate is a mirror image of the line that illustrates the initial increase that occurred back in March. Now, you might be wondering, why then was there an outbreak of infections here in the Sun Belt states that began back in July? Well, thankfully, there's a scientific explanation for all of the infections that occurred, in these southern states. You might not know this, maybe you do, but the 35th parallel, it's the latitude line that separates the northern states from the south. And as we take into consideration the seasonal viral patterns of the southern latitude states, we can see that the COVID curve that occurred in the Northeast back in April and May, it should be similar to the COVID curve that began in the Sun Belt states back in July. And what this means then is this, that the novel coronavirus is going to effectively burn out by the end of August. How do I know this? Well, because I can see that's what happened up in the Northeast. Now, there are those who insist that this decrease of deaths is, well, it's because of the lockdowns. Yet I would remind you of the fact that there really is no difference between the southern states that locked down and the southern states that reopened the economy much earlier. Simply put, there's no scientific reason for us to continue locking down. None. The only question left is this: will our nation actually embrace the science? Or are we going to continue to live in fear as we watch our nation slowly becoming a third world country? Finally, I would just make an appeal to every healthy Christian here. Listen, it's time for us to lead by example. It's time for us to show the world how we walk by faith with Jesus Christ. Remember, we walk by faith and not by sight. And with that being the case, I invite you, let's walk by faith by stepping out on our faith. Let's join together as we worship the Lord corporately. And if you're here in Austin, I invite you to join us for our weekly services right here at Calvary South Austin. If you'd like to know more about our service times and the measures that we're taking to sanitize our facilities, well, you can find all this information right here at calvarysouthAustin.com. I hope to see you soon. But until I do, let's continue fighting the good fight of faith, all for the glory of God.